Support for Flying Valiant Builds is brought to you by 1st and 64th Customs on YouTube, Video Geek Productions, the Brian Smith YouTube channel, Jonathan Vonesh, Wade Hendryx, Larry Presnell, and from support from viewers like you. Please like, share, and subscribe. I was so busy wondering if I could do this challenge, I never stopped to ask if I should. Now that is one big pile of... Hey there folks, Chuck here. Well, the Three Blind Mice have another challenge for us. This time around, it's a Gaslands build, and I happened to have recently picked up a bunch of discarded, unloved diecasts from my local flea market, and this is one of them. It's from the 70s, it's a Mopar, and it's pretty ratty, so it's right up my alley. The mice gave us the challenge to build a Gaslands style custom, but like all great challenges, this one had a twist. So with that in mind, let's get to the breakdown. For this challenge, you could use any 1/64th-ish scale car as the foundation, but you could use no 3D printed or custom/aftermarket parts. You could use as many cars, pieces of metal, styrene, scraps, toothpicks, etc. as you wished. But since I can't leave well enough alone, I decided to make it even harder on myself and restrict myself to using only parts from my junkyard bins, paint, and glue. Oh boy. Ready? Punch that subscribe button. Let's boogie. The thing I love about this old casting is that it's a metal, and I gotta be in my bonnet as I was picking parts to use as many metal pieces as possible. Fortunately, there were plenty in my scrap bin. I was also doing this the day before the build was due, so I had to work fast. So everything you're seeing from this point on was done in the same day, between the hours of 3 p.m. and midnight. It is by far my fastest build yet. I usually take at least 2 or 3 evenings to build a car. And yes, my detesting of a nub steering wheel had me sacrifice an entire Ferrari casting just for the steering wheel. It's okay, it was a no-name Hong Kong. Virtually all of the parts for this build came off of cars that I found recently at the local flea market. The only thing that didn't was the seats, which came from a Fresh Metals casting that I found at Big Lots that looked sort of like a Dodge Challenger in off-road mode, but oddly the interior was die-cast metal, so I grabbed that. Since my last build was yellow, I decided this one would be blue to provide a counterpoint to the yellow GTO. You can check out that build video in the upper right-hand corner. After I did the pale blue, I added some burnt umber to quickly add some rust shading to get myself started since I knew I was short on time. As I said, I wanted as much as possible to be metal on this car. The chassis, the seats, the roll cage, and the engine are all die-cast metal, so yes, this car is quite heavy. I went through all of my various metallics, my tarnished steel, my burnt iron, my tinny tin, to give as many different metal textures as possible for the cargo area in the back, which was unfortunately plastic, as were the wheels. But I wanted to stick to using only non-premium car parts for this build. The thing I will say about the Fresh Metals is that, while on the surface they don't look like much, the seats were quite detailed and included seatbelts, so I made sure to paint those so they would stand out. I also made sure to use mirror paint on as many metal connectors and clasps as possible to provide some reflection and shine variance across the car. I also had to think ahead and make sure the interior was done before I put the top on, because I knew it would be very hard to get past the roll cage. So once I had everything painted, I gave it a rust wash on the floor and a dust wash on the seats. And as soon as everything was dry, it was time to snap it all back together and get to the final detailing and weathering. I used mirror paint on the headlights, followed by metal medium to get them to stand out and look more glass-like. Once everything was together, I covered the entire car in Nuln oil, which works great as an acrylic filter to kind of darken everything down, and it gets into the nooks and crannies, but not as well as the Tamiya panel liner, so I always follow up with that afterwards, but we'll get to that in a moment. Once the Nuln oil was dry, I went over some select areas of the car with the MIG Extreme Rust Wash, which is relatively new to my arsenal, and I really enjoy it. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is an extreme wash in every sense of the word. Be sure to use it sparingly. It was at this point I remembered I was going to have a contrasting door, so since my yellow Gaslands car had a blue door, my blue Gaslands car will have a yellow door. I used Vallejo dust wash over much of the top of the car to add a good layer of filth. And once everything was together on the underside of the car, I covered the back rivet with this bit from a Fresh Metals tank and this radiator fan over the front rivet hole. I also used the tank's auxiliary barrels on the side of the cargo area to add some dimension and asymmetry to the build. They're also die-cast. And this really groovy brush guard from a Matchbox fantasy truck. And this rear brush guard was the front brush guard on that off-road Hot Wheels that provided the roll cage, also die-cast metal. It was at this point I remembered that I had forgotten to add bullet holes into the casting before painting, so I carefully used a 1mm bit to add some over the paint, and it actually worked out quite well because you got this nice pop of freshly drilled metal, but I dulled them up later. I then used Vallejo German black-brown to add some chipping effects to the door, and a few strategic chips to the tanks on the side, before going over the door with MIG track wash to give it a different filter than the rest of the car. It was way too dark, but rolling a Q-tip over it gave it a nice finish. Alright, we're almost done. One last filter, this time MIG's dust. The diamond plate got a little touch-up, courtesy of Tamiya Weathering Powder's silver, followed by Tamiya panel liner to bring out all the edges, nooks, and crannies. Once that was done, I went over all of the trim pieces that were left with some Stuart Simple mirror paint. I like using mirror paint over a dull silver on trim just to provide a contrast to show how weathered the car actually is and to make it not look too uniform in texture. I touched up the spotlights up front to make sure that they stood out, and then I remembered that I had bought some special effects paint, including coagulated blood and fresh blood from Green Stuff World. So I thought I'd wrap up this build with a little extra spice. First the coagulated blood, and then a little fresh blood inside it to add some texture. Hey, safety isn't exactly a priority in Gaslands. And with that, now it was time to tie everything together with a little mud from Tamiya Weathering Powders on the bottom of the car, tires, and chassis. Then it was time for the decal and the number. So now it's time to compare with what we started with. This vintage Matchbox Superfast Challenger that's definitely seen better days, and using only the scraps of other doomed cars, it became a king of the wastelands. How do you think I did? Personally, it's not my favorite build of mine, but I'm still quite pleased with how it turned out. Let me know in the comments below how I did. As always, I want to thank the patrons that have done so much to keep this show running. You saw the Bandit level patrons at the beginning of this video. I also want to thank Mid-Island Customs Diecast, my wife Carolyn, the best math tutor on Zoom, Maple Leaf Matchbox Makeovers, Double B's Customs, Gary Tasker, Diecast Pirate, my amazing Aunt Tracy, and at Mr. Zanzibar91 on Instagram, who, as you may have seen in my unboxing video, kindly sent me my own copy of Gaslands Refueled so I could get a better understanding of how this game works and how to build a car for it. It was very kind of you, Clarence, and I thank you. I also want to thank my Douglas level patrons, the Good Bad Better podcast, Jordan Kleinhenn, the Curtis Crafts YouTube channel, and the Jim Silva YouTube channel. Thank you all so much. This literally could not happen without those people. If you like what I do and you want to support the action and get some extra behind-the-scenes goodies, plus my monthly giveaway, which I'm just realizing I'm late for this month, you can join in over at flyingvaliant.com. Get cool stuff, win cool prizes, and get exclusive access to me and what I'm told is my model building prowess. I'm kind of booked up right now on commissions, but if you're not in a hurry, you can always talk to me about buying one of my builds, including this one, or commissioning your own custom build, 3D printed parts, or printed decals by emailing flyingvaliant@gmail.com. And if you want to go public with your love of this channel, you can always buy Flying Valiant merch over at my brother's TeePublic or Redbubble shops. And if you just want some general diecast or automotive themed artwork, he's got a lot of great stuff over there as well. Thanks, Justin. And of course, the most valuable thing that you can do to this video is to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment, even if it's just to say hi to Wiggles the cat. Well, I'm realizing that on top of being late on this video, I also have a bunch of other builds to get to. So it's time to wrap things up here. As always, I want to thank you for coming along with me for the ride. So until next time, stay fresh, cheese bags.